Youth and youth, stay focused. Don't put your trust in vanity. Just have some love and unity, okay? Love and unity along the way. Whoa, strictly Rastafari, man, I pray, 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 pray. Love and unity along the way. Whoa, strictly Rastafari, man, I say. Well, you know me pray to Jah and night, man, heal him in the day. Be guide and protect I, so I'll never go astray. No matter what the wicked of the world want say. Jah alone, forget all the glory. Jah alone.
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Mussington. I am Barbudan, and I bring you kind greetings from the tiny island of Antigua and Barbuda. Let me first of all say how humbled I feel and grateful, one, to come after Grandma here and her spirited speech in terms of resistance. And the story I want to share with you tonight is one of resistance from way back when. Now, Barbuda represents an island where the 62 square miles, a tiny speck compared to Brazil, that island is managed for over a century as owned by all the people. So it's communally owned. It demonstrates communal land ownership. As a result of that, we have come to this point as a resilient and strong people. And as Grandma says, if you understand your connection to the land, if you understand how that is a part of you and you are a part of it, that strength, no one will be able to move you and disconnect you. So my story is to demonstrate for you tonight and to encourage you in terms of this community land trust. It is communal land. We all own it. I want to encourage you that it is something that works. And in fact, I believe it is the answer to many of the problems that we have here on planet Earth. Now, our story began, we as Barbudans, we were taken from Africa. If you look at how land is managed in Africa, that concept of people belonging to the land, living with the land, living off the land, being good stewards of the land, that is a part of who we are. So when we were brought to Barbuda as enslaved people, we went through that period of enslavement different from any other of the plantations in the Caribbean. Barbuda was not a plantation. Barbuda served as a supply station for the other plantations. So Barbudans were skilled. We were the people who produced the leather. We were the persons who looked the type of wood to make the ships. We were the persons who built the wagons, who supplied everything else. So the point I want to make about that is that our family structure remained intact. And so we were able to trace back and see the connection and to grow that connection to what we have today. And this communal land ownership came out of necessity. Because we were not dependent on the enslavers for all of our needs, we were basically left. We had to use our African traditions in terms of living off the land while providing labor for the slave masters. So that is something that we grew up with and developed our community under the worst of conditions. This sense of independence, this sense of connectedness to our land, which builds resilience. Now, emancipation came in 1834. And when the Emancipation Proclamation was read out in our sister island, then Antigua, as Barbudans, we didn't know anything about it. That was 25 miles away. But we heard about it a couple of weeks later. And so when we heard about it, we said, okay, everybody free, so we are free as well. But there was something that was more significant. 1834 emancipation meant that the slave owners, they had to give up their assets. And that 1834 proclamation basically meant that they had to be compensated for the loss of their assets. So the owner of Barbuda then, he left his asset, abandoned them, and he went to England to collect his compensation. Now, what were the assets? The assets included us, humans. So we were left to fend for ourselves. Fortunately, we had that knowledge and that tradition of the land and the connection to the land, and so we were able to survive. Colonialism followed, and literally a community was forgotten on an entire island. We didn't mind. We survived. We lived. We did well. But the system at the time, the colonial government, Britain, they wanted to continue managing their holdings. And there was a time when they reached to say that, okay, it was too expensive to manage them that closely. So let's lump them together. So that is why Barbuda was attached to Antigua out of convenience. So we were attached to another island whose history and culture was totally different. But we maintained that communal land system, that community where we helped each other build our homes, lived off the land in terms of farming, hunting, fishing, and being good stewards to the land in terms of not depleting it and destroying it. So we developed systems. In 1976, we developed a legislative groundwork called the Barbuda Council, which became responsible for the administration of the entire island. That, in essence, was what you are now looking at as a community land trust. So the Barbuda Council, as the administrative authority, was in charge of the land system. So we went along with that system, and obviously there was still conflict between Antigua and Barbuda because we are two different people. So independence came about in 1981, and essentially we were dragged into independence protesting, because what we were saying is that if you take us into independence with Antigua, we are going to be abused. The bigger country with more people, they are going to not respect our land system, and eventually they will try to take it away from us. Brothers and sisters, today we are facing exactly that. So we went along, and in 2007, we decided to formalize that system of communal land ownership in the form of a law called the Barbuda Land Act. The Barbuda Land Act started out by saying this: land in Barbuda is owned in common by the people of Barbuda. Land shall not be sold. Under that system, we instituted several requirements. One, as a Barbudan, and we defined who a Barbudan is, because we wanted to maintain that link to the people, because we were very much aware that if you allow people with money to be able to come in, sooner or later on a tiny island, you can become the minority and disappear. So that law was designed to maintain our control and ownership of the land. First of all, it required a land use plan to be brought into being. It required a land registry. It required a development control authority which would manage our development. It required a planning commission which would monitor all that. But more than anything else, it laid down the structure in which people will benefit. So as a Barbudan, on reaching the age of 18, you were guaranteed 3 types of land for your living. 1, to build your residence. That land that you were allocated to build your residence, you can pass it on to your children and grandchildren forever. You were guaranteed land to do farming, and that will remain in your possession as long as you continue farming. And you were guaranteed land for commercial purposes, businesses. And as long as you are doing that, that will be yours. Now, the benefit of that system was tremendous. It meant that a young person reaching the age of 18 immediately will start off with an asset base amounting to, say, 100, 200,000 US dollars. That asset base is used now to build a house, a home. He does not have to go and get a mortgage. He does not have to go and get a loan anywhere. And using his own resources and our cultural norms of helping each other. Many of our homes in Barbados are built by us, by getting help from others. And so that system offered advantages across the board. And it is why I bring you this message tonight. It works. Now, under that system, you find that we are able to maintain our health. So when it comes to food security, when it comes to the absence of poverty, Antigua and Barbuda has 17 constituencies. Barbuda only is one. And a poverty assessment was done. And what was found that in all those constituencies, the one that has the lowest level of poverty, highest food security, was Barbuda. What was the reason for that? Our connectedness to the land and the fact that we owned the land in common. So with that, I want to end by telling you of a challenge. 2017, we were hit by a hurricane. At that time, it was the strongest Atlantic storm ever to be recorded in history. Barbuda survived. One of the reasons it survived was because our houses were superior in terms of strength. And the reason why they could be superior, because you can put more into building strong houses than to paying off a mortgage. Okay? So we only had one death. Unfortunately, the powers that be used that opportunity and the excuse to evacuate the entire island. Every one of us. Immediately after that, we began to hear that the island is going to be redeveloped into a luxury real estate destination. Okay? Now, when you talk about resilience, we were prevented from coming back for a while. But the connection we had to our land meant that nothing the central government administration did could keep us from there. So if it meant without electricity, without water, without medical services, without educational services, we went back and re-established our community. So the message I want to say to you, guard your connection to the land. Use it and the power that it gives you to fight and resist what the world is going to be throwing at you. We stewarded Barbuda. We acted as good stewards to Barbuda such that in 2017 and 2026, Barbuda is a paradise. Pink sand beaches, intact and healthy marine resources, clean waters. Why? Because we protected it. But at the same time, that can be a disadvantage because you have people in this world who have the power of money, who will look at that as a paradise. In fact, there's a particular actor called Robert De Niro who actually is have a development which he called Paradise Found. We never lost our paradise, but yeah, he found it. Okay? So, when you struggle and remain connected to your land, be aware there are going to be persons in the world who look at it and will try to deprive you of that land. Land is power. The Community Land Trust is a form of communal ownership. Use that power to resist. We have a saying in Barbuda, people, land, culture. What that demonstrates is that every economic activity is based on land which provides the resources. People use those resources to survive and build yourself into who you are. And the way you do it is your culture. It is you, me, who we are. Never give that up. People, land, culture. the Community Land Trust. Use it to protect who you are. Thank you.
Barbuda, people, land, culture, not for sale.
We will be focusing on the Emancipation Service, which will be on the last Sunday of July. I think it's July 30th. And then on Tuesday, August 1 is the big day, the event that all persons have been looking forward to. That's the day when we'll be having the rich cultural exchanges and the cultural exposition there at Maidstone in Manchester. Thank you, sir.
SSBS, DBSS TV, Manasseh Promotions coming your way right here from New York City, Boogie Down Bronx. It's a pleasure to be here with Mr. Garth Smith. You know, this man is versed very much in what's happening to our folks, and he has taken on the task of trying to put together a storyboard for us, letting us know what has happened in the past and to keep the fire burning for our young folks. Brother Garth, I know you've been in the city now for how many days now have you been here?
I came in New York on Sunday of the past week, the 14th of May.
Okay, and how long will you be here for?
I will be actually going back to Jamaica on Sunday, the 21st of May.
Okay, and since you've been here, I know you've been meeting with lots of folks in preparation for the event coming up in Jamaica for Emancipation Day.
Certainly.
I heard earlier you mentioned that upon finding about these particular places where these slaves were housed,
Yes.
you and a team of folks went out and some research.
Yeah.
Was it upon these researches that you found these particular artifacts? Did you find them yourself?
We managed to have found some
Okay.
out of our own investigation, but what we also discovered is that some of the residents in the community actually had some in their possession,
Okay.
seemingly oblivious of the value of what they possessed.
Right.
They willingly gave them to us though, with a view of having us store those in our museum.
Okay. Were there some who that up in finding out that there was some value, requested some monetary compensation?
Nobody did that.
Oh,
Nobody did
beautiful.
The community spirit is very much alive there, very much well, and in fact they found it interesting to the extent that they willingly gave what they wanted to give, or had to give rather,
Okay.
to be a part of the museum. They thought it valuable that they could make that sort of contribution to preserving the rich heritage of our community.
Okay, and I would now seem to think that because of the ability of this particular unit to put together these artifacts, this is one of the unique things about the area now, that Maidstone is now on the map officially as a historical site for, how would you say, presenting our past.
Precisely. In fact, Maidstone is regarded as one of the few free villages at that time.
Right.
There were very few free villages that were developed in Jamaica at that time, and in fact at one stage Maidstone was regarded as one of the best structured free villages in 1840.
Okay, so in other words, we had a community that had a systematic structure in terms of values, education, and politics and all that, because
Precisely.
folks were able to vote.
Precisely.
And like you said earlier, in order for you to vote, you had to have that property.
Lands. You have to own lands.
Okay, now we had a couple storms.
Yes.
In the past, and I gather there were a lot of damages.
Yes.
Did any of the artifacts meet the fate of being damaged by any of the storms?
Very unfortunately, we had some damage done to some of those artifacts by the hurricane of 2004.
Okay.
However, we managed to salvage some of it. We are looking at the whole matter of cleaning those now and putting preservatives on some of them. And in fact, what we're also doing, we are looking at broadening the scope of inflows of artifacts into the museum. We have had dialogue with one of the local members of parliament, a parliamentarian, with a view to acquiring a permanent site for the storing of those artifacts. So we are actually in negotiations with him now the Member of Parliament, the Honourable Dean Peart, for providing that for us.
Okay. Does any other countries, like for instance the United States, who might have similar artifacts or similar situations where we come across our history, maybe accidentally, have you made contact with them and shared any of the information that you've acquired with these, but like, so for instance, other countries, maybe Cuba, United States, neighboring countries and so forth?
The neighboring countries, unfortunately, we have not had direct dialogue with them where that is concerned. However, there are Jamaicans living in some of the Caribbean islands who have come on visits to Emancipation Celebration and have taken back what they've seen to enrich their own cultural exchange there. Now, what we also look at is the fact that Jamaicans living in New York, Jamaicans living in England, Jamaicans living in other parts of the world who have come back to Jamaica on August the 1st to be a part of Emancipation Celebration, they are learning some of the richness of their community for the first time.
Right.
And they have been able, although they have not been able to take back with them some of the real artifacts, they have been able to bring back on tape, on video, to the United States and other parts, some of these things to educate additionally to educate Jamaicans who are there with respect to the history back home.
Okay.
I think too that this will actually broaden the scope of investigation by other persons from other countries who go and see what we're doing there, to start their own investigation into their own cultural practices and their own communities. You just never know what you'll find.
Absolutely.
You just never know what you'll find.
As far as the artifacts are concerned, on Emancipation Day, are they readily available for the audience to view?
Yes, all the artifacts that we have at Nazareth are available for the public in general to view. What really happens is that we store those in a particular room. Now, on the Emancipation Celebration, we have them labeled and arrayed in a particular format. There are persons who are in charge of it, who will explain to the visitors what the pieces are and the significance of those pieces. So after the Emancipation Celebration is over for that particular day, we actually put them back in safekeeping. But yes, they are available for persons to see.
Okay.
My fellow Jamaicans, Emancipation Day calls us to remember one of the most consequential turning points in our history. On the 1st of August 1838, full freedom came to the formerly enslaved people of Jamaica after centuries of bondage, exploitation, and injustice. That freedom was not freely or generously given. It was secured through the courage, resistance, and endurance of generations of our ancestors. Some resisted openly. Others preserved their dignity through faith, family, culture, work, and community. They refused to accept that the conditions imposed upon them defined their worth or limited their claim to humanity. Today, we honor them. We remember those whose names were recorded in history and the many more whose names are unknown. We remember the mothers who held families together under brutal conditions, the fathers who struggled to protect and provide, the spiritual leaders who sustained hope, and those who risked everything in the cause of freedom. Their victory was the assertion of a fundamental truth, that every human being is created with dignity, conscience, and the right to determine the course of his or her own life. Emancipation gave our ancestors legal freedom, but it did not immediately give them property, education, economic security, or equal access to opportunity. They entered freedom with very little material wealth and with institutions still shaped by the inequalities of slavery. Yet, they did not wait passively for others to build a future for them. They established free villages. They purchased land, built churches and schools, created businesses, cultivated farms, and formed strong communities. They understood that freedom had to be supported by ownership, education, discipline, cooperation, and faith. We have seen this same spirit in our own time. In the months since Hurricane Melissa, communities across Jamaica have suffered real loss. Nevertheless, they have taken up the hard work of rebuilding. Neighbor helping neighbor, families repairing homes, communities restoring what the storm took away. The endurance, the faith and cooperation that carried our ancestors out of bondage will carry us through reconstruction. And we are determined to rebuild not only what stood before, but something stronger and more resilient, so that no storm can undo in a night what a generation has built. True freedom is the capacity to make responsible choices, to provide for one's family, to own property, to pursue education, to establish a business, to worship according to conscience, and to participate fully in the life of the nation. Political freedom without economic opportunity is incomplete. Legal rights without personal responsibility cannot produce lasting progress. The promise of emancipation must therefore be renewed in every generation through the work of creating a society to which every Jamaican has a fair opportunity to advance. We must continue to widen access to education, land ownership, housing, employment, and entrepreneurship. We must build an economy in which effort is rewarded, enterprise is encouraged, and families can accumulate assets that may be passed from one generation to the next. We must recover that spirit of self-reliance and enterprise. At the same time, emancipation reminds us that freedom must be protected from every form of domination. No Jamaican should live under the control of criminals, gangs, or violent men who seek to govern communities through fear. A community cannot be truly free when children are afraid to walk to school, when businesses must pay extortion, or when families are forced to remain silent in the presence of wrongdoing. The struggle for freedom, therefore, continues wherever law-abiding citizens are denied peace, security, and opportunity. We must stand firmly for law, justice, and order. We must strengthen families, support responsible parenting, and teach our children that freedom carries duties as well as rights. We must reject the idea that discipline is oppression, that accountability is hostility, or that personal responsibility can be replaced by permanent dependence. The strongest tribute we can pay to our ancestors is to use our freedom well. We honor them when we educate our children, care for our elderly, build honest businesses, protect our communities, and conduct ourselves with dignity. We honor them when we reject prejudice and injustice. We honor them when we refuse to allow the circumstances of our birth to determine the limits of our ambition. Emancipation is both an inheritance and an instruction. It tells us where we have come from, but it is also a call for us to decide what we will become. Let us therefore continue the work of building a Jamaica in which freedom is supported by opportunity, independence by ownership, rights by responsibility, and hope by purposeful action. May we remain worthy of the sacrifices of those who came before us. May we preserve the freedom they secured. And may God continue to bless Jamaica, land we love.